Sean O'Connell Show brought to you today and every day by Les Schwab. They've got the accessories you're looking for, the tires, the wheels. Stop by your local Les Schwab today, and the professionals will get the job done right the very first time. Checking in on some NBA Utah Jazz talk. Gordy Chiesa, our resident NBA insider, joins us on a Tuesday. Gordy, how are you?
OC, I'm doing fine. Thank you.
So Utah Jazz now with 2 wins on the season, and they were able to beat the Spurs 111 to 110. Now, I go back to the conversations we had in the preseason, talking about preseason basketball, summer league basketball, and you said, hey, what you need to do in these games is you need to be showing that you can compete with guys that are kind of on your level. You can compete with guys that are in your age category. And the Spurs and the Jazz have a lot of commonality when it comes to that. A lot of young players on both of these teams, promising stars in certain spots. And the Jazz, they got a win over a team that is also in a development phase like they are. Is that the right way to look at a game like this one?
Yeah, very much. Absolutely. So both teams are somewhat equal, with Victor Wembanyama being the X factor of a generational talent. However, Walker Kessler did a yeoman's job as trying to attempt to slow him down. And then Sexton was tremendous, and so was Filipowski, and so was John Collins. So in that game, the Jazz showed their modest depth, where Collins off the bench played tremendous. He was rock steady, and so did Filipowski. It was a solid win. Now add to that, do you realize that the Jazz played the Spurs all 4 times this year, OC, before December 1st? So the Jazz see the Spurs next Thursday on the 21st again, so it's really soon, and then Tuesday the 26th. So if you're a Jazz/Spurs aficionado, after November 26th, there'll be no more Jazz-Spurs games.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, the scheduling. The scheduling is based on so many variables. Now with the hockey team being in Salt Lake City, is that a lot of times now you would play a team with almost like more balance, as far as you might play them, let's say, in November, you might play them in January, then March, then April. Now that's all changed now.
Very interesting. I want to talk about that Kessler and Wembanyama matchup a little bit more. Look, Kessler has been, I think, a good surprise for the Utah Jazz fans that maybe didn't know what he was going to be about this year. He's improved a lot. He's especially a rebounding machine. Not as much when Victor Wembanyama is on the floor and he's trying to defend a guy, like you said, who's a generational talent. So when you've got a guy like Kessler matching up with a guy that everyone in the league, everyone around the league recognizes as an alien, I mean, his branding with Nike is that whole alien thing. I mean, he's a one-of-one right now in the NBA, is Victor Wembanyama. What are you really looking for? What do you really ask Kessler to do in a matchup against someone who's a future Hall of Famer, most likely?
Neutralize them in the lane. In other words, when there's shots in the air, be able to defensive rebound or offensively carve out space to get inside position and get stick back rebounds. And that's what he did in that game, is that Kessler battled Wembanyama. Let's not forget, in that game on Saturday afternoon, Wembanyama had no assist and 6 turnovers and no steals. And so Wembanyama gets, 24 points, 16 boards, 7 blocks, and that was absolutely impressive. But the no assist and 6 turnovers, that meant that the Jazz defensive players got up into him and made him make panic passes or walk with the ball. So Kessler, as a third-year player right now, has had a good bounce-back campaign. OC, here's his quick numbers. Averaging 9.2 points per game, 10.7 rebounds, 2.8 blocks, and shooting 68.6 field goal percentage. We know it's a lot of it lob pass dunks and situational baskets as far as pass-offs. And so he's done a really good job for the Jazz. He's being impactful in the lane, and that's what his job is.
He's actually averaging more rebounds per game than Wembanyama is, but in this one, it didn't have a particularly prolific rebounding game, which is why I asked you the question, because it feels like that's kind of his role, to clean up the boards. But you move the goalposts when you're against a guy like Wembanyama, right? Or do you?
Yes, you do. No, the answer is yes. You make him work harder for his baskets, and you try to be with him as physical as you can without over dramatically fouling. It's that fine line where your technique and tenacity has to be there, but you need both at the exact same time. You could be intense without no technique. It's a foul. You can have technique, but no leverage as far as getting under the guy, and that creates an easy basket for him. So it's that fine line that every defensive player, when you're guarding an elite performer, that has to come through.
Phoenix is tonight. What should we be looking for with this Utah team against the Phoenix Suns, who have superstar players, at least a couple of them?
Yeah, very much. Now, when tonight's game, Durant's out with a left calf strain. So he got hurt Friday again. This Friday got hurt, and so probably he'll be out roughly until December 7th. And so that's the first test for them right now, as far as the Suns being 8-2, they're tied for second place with the Warriors. And so now they're going to be a perimeter-orientated team with Durant not being there. I know Durant plays outside, I get it, but Durant can go inside as far as the mid-post. So Devin Booker now they need him to score more. See, Booker is the one guy that OC has transformed his game, where he's adjusted no matter what the personnel is in his team. So Booker isn't really shooting well from the floor this year, but his assists are great. So he's averaging 7.3 assists and 23.1 points per game, but he's only shooting 42.6 from the field and 32 from threes. So he's sacrificing some of his aggressiveness for the sake of the team. Now, Bradley Beal, he's only missed 2 games this year, while he missed 29 last year. And we know about last year when the Phoenix Suns in the playoffs, and that's how they're judged, they lost to the T-Wolves in the first round 4-0. So Bradley Beal's been relatively healthy. He's done a good job for them, averaging 17 points a game. But the biggest factor for the Suns tonight is just the maturation where they traded for Tyus Jones, gives them a true point guard that takes away some of the pressure from Durant and Booker to make plays all the time. So Tyus Jones, from the Wizards, he's averaging 11 points a game and 6.3 assists. That's the great part. Add to that, even better than that, only 1.1 turnovers a game. So he's able to get the offense for the Suns going. Now the question is, can the Suns hold in there till they get Durant back? My instincts tell me they will.
So when you're adjusting to a Phoenix Suns lineup without Kevin Durant and knowing that that's going to have Bradley Beal and Devin Booker be, I guess, a little bit more involved offensively, how do you attack those guys defensively? How do you change your look if you're the Utah Jazz to try and limit guys that are now being asked to carry a larger load for Phoenix?
Oh, very much. So now Colin Sexton's going to have to try to attack off the dribble Devin Booker or Bradley Beal or Tyus Jones. So Colin Sexton and Keontae George, we know, didn't play last game with a left foot soreness. They're saying he's going to play tonight. So Keontae and Colin Sexton and Cody Williams, when he's in there, and also maybe Isaiah Collier, who had his first start the other day off injury, he'll be in the game, I'm assuming, and Jordan Clarkson, that those guys now have to make the scorers on the Suns have to move their feet defensively. So now you change your mentality. You're the aggressor, and make those scorers have to guard. If they don't want to guard them, then you're going to score baskets against them. So it's a mental part, how you adjust your game based on who's there, and who's there, but also who's the main guys that are trying to conserve energy defensively so they can score the ball. Now, OC, just like an NFL playoff game, there's no trying to conserve energy. In a regular playoff game for, the Phoenix Suns, in the fourth quarter, you have to guard your position, both offense and defense, to get the knockout punch and win.
Gordy, how long can the Cleveland Cavaliers keep this undefeated streak going?
What fun. They're 12-0 right now, and it's a fun story. Let's not forget, the first thing about the Cavaliers, I mentioned this question often in the last day or two, OC, is that they have a new coach, Kenny Atkinson. And so J.B. Bickerstaff did a good job there last year with the Cavaliers. However, ownership felt they needed a different voice. Kenny Atkinson, former coach of the Nets, was an assistant coach of the Golden State Warriors. He gets there, and he jumpstarts their offense. So the Cavaliers are first in the NBA in points scored. They're the best shooting team in the NBA, 52% from the field. They're the best three-point shooting team in the NBA, 41.3 from threes. They're first in offensive rating, and they're seventh in defensive rating. They're third in the NBA in steals. So, OC, they score the ball, and then they steal the ball. The only team better than the Cavs as far as stealing the ball are the Thunder, who's also in first place in the West, and the Atlanta Hawks. So Donovan Mitchell, former Jazz player, has been sensational. But Darius Garland, they almost tried to trade him in the off season, and he responded so far. He's playing great. 20.2 points per game, 52.6 from the field, 46% from threes, and 6.5 assists. And they almost tried to trade him. So they can keep it together because offensively they're really a juggernaut, and defensively they compete. So it's really a fun story. 12-0. The Eastern Conference only has two winning teams right now as we speak, above 500. They are the Cavaliers and the world champion Celtics. So it's an imbalance in the East, where the West is absolutely truly 1 through 11 are incredible in the West, while in the East right now it's 1 and 2 dominant. And my instincts tell me that the 76ers, when they get healthy with Maxey coming back, Tyrese Maxey coming back off injury, and Joel Embiid be able to play, that they'll move up in the standings too.
Gordy Chiesa, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things NBA. Touched on a little Utah Jazz already. I saw that, I guess, yesterday, that the East is just underperforming right now. How much does that balance out over 82 games, though?
It does balance out. Right now, it's somewhat injury, where the key players are out, but also it's player development, where it seems to me that in the West they do a much accelerated job of developing their draft picks, and those guys now are playing either secondary roles or in some cases primary roles. So it does even out slightly, but is advantageous to the West. As far as they've done a good job as far as drafting and fast tracking their players right now. Speaking of the West, OC, tonight, I know you're a formerly Bay Area fan. Tonight, Klay Thompson returns to the Bay Area for his first time after giving his all for the Golden State Warriors. So the game's on TNT nationally. Here's Klay Thompson's numbers this year with the Dallas Mavericks. And we're going to see Klay Thompson here on Thursday when the Mavs come to Salt Lake City to play against the Jazz. Klay's averaging 13.8 points per game, 41.8 from the field, 35.4 from three, and 3.7 rebounds. So he hasn't really found his niche totally yet, but he's such a factor as far as the Mavericks as they go forward.
So I've been following closely because, I was out there covering that Warriors team when the Splash Brothers were on their rise. And it's a really interesting hearing the comments from one side and the comments from the Klay side. The Warriors, I think everyone in the Bay Area loves Klay, didn't want to see him playing in another uniform, but still loves him. Klay Thompson feels when you hear his responses about, hey, what it's going to be like going back to the Bay, he seems a lot more guarded, like maybe – I don't know. I don't want to say negative, but like he said things like, there's no point looking back. It's all about moving forward. I'm very happy to be with the Mavs. It's re-energized my career. I get saying things for your new fan base and saying things for your new franchise. What do you like to see a player talk like the way – how do you like to see a player talk about his former team? How do you like to see a player react to returning to a place where he, established his Hall of Fame career? Is there a right way or a wrong way to do these weird reunions in a season?
There's a right way. Is that the fact of the matter is that Klay was a major contributor. Your point's well taken. Heading to the Hall of Fame, 4-time NBA champion, and then back-to-back years he had major injuries, and the Warriors hung in there with him, and they really helped him as far as the physical and the mental toll to get through it. And then they did offer him a contract last year. So the summer of this past summer, they offered him a 2 years contract extension at roughly $26 million, and he felt that was insulting. So he got the exact same money, but an extra year on it. So the numbers are basically the same, but an extra year. And so the Warriors economically didn't want to go over this. They call it the second apron. I'll explain it in layman's term. It's for a team that it's a really a punitive tax penalty when you go over $189 million, and that would have put them over the second. They call it the second apron, and that's why they opened the contract, but it wasn't the same amount of years that he wanted. And so, from Clay's point of view, you want to just be positive because when you were there, you were a huge factor in that playing alongside your sidekick, Stephen Curry and Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala really helped your career. And Steve Kerr is a tremendous coach. And you had the right coach there in Warriors and the right coach now in Jason Kidd in Dallas.
Gordy Chiesa for another minute or two here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking the NBA. Utah Jazz getting back in action. Golden State Warriors are a surprise team for you as they take on Klay Thompson. I mean, this was supposed to be a year where they had to kind of figure some things out, and we saw very early on they were going with a 12-man rotation. Are you surprised that the Warriors are where they're at?
Yes, absolutely. I'm surprised in a good way. Is that they did it by committee. It's so we all love Stephen Curry. See, the Warriors are first in the NBA defending the three-point line, and so they've improved as far as dramatically less turnovers. Some of the games they lost last year were absolutely self-inflicted, were bizarre turnovers. This year, they've cut back as far as decision-making with the ball and much more measured, just generally speaking. But the single biggest factor is defensively. They're engaged mentally. They're first in the NBA defending the three-point line. They're only allowing 31.9 from three. So this is the era of three-point shooting. The Warriors are the best team defensively in the NBA guarding the three-point line. And so Steph has been tremendous. So has Buddy Hield. Wiggins has been very good. Kuminga, whether he's off the bench or starting, has been very good. Draymond's been solid. Trey Jackson Davis has been tremendous. Gary Payton off the bench. Pajensky off the bench. Kyle Anderson off the bench. Moses Moody, vastly underrated. He could start on a lot of teams. And Lindy Waters is a knockdown shooter. And also Kevon Looney. So they have about 10, 11, 12 guys that you can make it the narrative could start other teams, and collectively it works right now. So it's a pleasant surprise. But the Thunder now with Chet Holmgren, OC, out until probably till the All-Star break. We'll see now if they can hang in there. Last night, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scored 45 points and answered the call.
The sports are very different, but I started today talking about the Utah football team and utilization and finding the right kind of mix of when to try to get guys the ball and when to play guys has, I think, been a struggle for that team this year. And I wanted to extend that to the basketball world. And, like, how passionate are the debates and how passionate are the discussions when coaching staff is trying to figure out the proper utilization for player X versus player Y? We've got this star, he's got to be on the floor for, all but 4 minutes of the game, but you got this great sixth man. What's the proper minutes for him? How complicated is that equation, finding the right way to utilize the different tools you've got at your disposal in an NBA roster?
Yeah, it's complicated, and it's so interesting because the better teams understand it. See, basketball is a game of rhythm, and it's fluidity. And so you never want to have five players that want the ball. So it's balancing the guys that can score the ball, especially on the second side. The teams that generally win score most of their points on the second side of the floor, meaning this, again, in layman's term. The first side of the floor, the team comes down, they execute, they make one or two passes or screens, then the ball is swung or cutting action to the second side to shift the defense. And now, so like any sport, you want to give the scorers a chance to operate in space. Because whenever there's space, they can showcase in basketball, their ball skills and also their dexterity and the ability to create shots for them. The lesser teams, OC, shoot way too many shots on the first side, and the defense now is packed in. So you got to balance the floor with that move with the ball, that can score the ball, that are willing to screen, that want to cut in the game, and do it almost spontaneously as far as in an organic way. And so that's what makes the Warriors, for example, Kyle Anderson would be the classic example of a guy that moves the ball, can play with the ball, can score the ball, and does it very happily. And so does Pajensky. So those two guys, we mentioned the Warriors, so they play in a rhythm with Stephen Curry or Buddy Hield or Andre Wiggins, who are really knockdown shooters or catch-and-go drivers. It's fascinating. There's nothing like it in the NBA. As far as you've got to be able to understand how to score the ball within the team concept.
Gordy, what's your list for me today?
My list today about scoring the ball. Here we go. OC. NBA career leaders in the most regular season games of scoring 35 points or more a game. So career-wise, OC, 35 points a game. Quickly, what's the attributes of a dominant point producer? 1, ball skills, shooting touch with range. 2, interior presence, jackhammer power finisher. 3, foul line resonant via skills, strength, or deception. And 4, alpha dog, personality, supreme confidence, baller. Here we go. Has a Utah Jazz flavor on it. The 15th all-time as far as most games of 35 points or more, Adrian Dantley, formerly the Jazz, 150. Number 14, nicknamed the Mailman, Carl did it 151 times. Number 13 all-time, nicknamed the Iceman, George Gervin did it 161. Number 12, not playing tonight here in Salt Lake City because of the injury, Kevin Durant has scored 35 points or more in 166 games career-wise. Number 11, nicknamed the Human Highlight Film, Dominique Wilkins did it 170 times. Number 10, nicknamed Mr. Clutch, Jerry West did it 188 times. Number 9, plays for the Clippers right now, James Harden has scored 35 points or more, 189 games. Number 8 all-time, nicknamed The Answer, Allen Iverson did it 193. Number 7, Elgin Baylor of the Lakers did it 197 times. Number 6, his nickname was the captain, also the all-time greatest with the sky hook. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scored 35 points or more in a game 198 times. Number 5, nicknamed the Big O, Oscar Robertson did it 213. Number 4, Kobe Bryant of the Lakers did it 236 times. Number 3, he plays the Lakers right now. Nickname is King James. LeBron James has scored 35 points or more in a game, NBA, 243 times. Last 2, Michael Jordan scored 331 times, 35 points or more NBA game. And number 1, this is crazy, his nickname was the Big Dipper. Wilt Chamberlain scored 35 points or more in 381 games in his career. Thus, that's my list. Quickly, just in present Jazz players. Jordan Clarkson has done it 11 times in his career, 35 points or more, and Larry Markkinen has done it 10 times, 35 points or more. And Colin Sexton has done it 5 times.
Wow.
So Wilt Chamberlain, 35 points or more, 381 times in his career. It's crazy.
So Wilt is one of these guys, right? We talk about it with every sport, but there's individuals that are timeless. Wilt played in an era where, he was a big-time outlier with his size and athleticism. And there's a lot of guys that were greats in the NFL days, early days, in the NBA early days, that in today's game would not necessarily be great. They didn't have the physicality or the athleticism for it or whatever. Wilt feels like one of those guys that, none of us got to watch him live. I didn't get to watch him live. But if you dropped a young Wilt Chamberlain onto an NBA floor today, he'd still be the same guy.
That's correct. Yeah, running the floor. I mean, he was so athletic, and he was so. Remember, he was 7 foot, 275 pounds. With his waist was with 32-inch waist, so he's absolutely chiseled, And you've seen the films of him playing volleyball, and you've seen the films of him running in old school sneakers, running the 440-yard dash and high jumping without any technique. So he could play in the NBA right now and absolutely dominate too.
That's insane. Gordy, it's always great catching up with you. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks. Stay well. Peace out.
Gordy Chiesa, hopefully driving safe. It's a snowy, wet day here in Salt Lake City. The hot lunch is coming next on Utah's #1 sports talk. It's the ESPN 792.1 FM, part of the Utah ESPN radio network. quarterbacks left on the roster, effectively. You got Luke Batari, who started against Colorado last year and got the win. Maybe the Ferrari's just good luck against Colorado. And, of course, Isaac Wilson, the young freshman who was beat out by Brandon Rose in that, whatever it was, week 9 bye-week quarterback battle. So maybe Brandon Rose is healthy, and this is just complete hearsay. However, this coaching staff has received some criticism for not being forthcoming with quarterback information given the injury situation this year. Coming out of that bye week, BYU had to probably figure out which guy was going to start. They had to make their best guess on which guy was going to start. And actually, one of their best defensive players, Isaiah Glasker, had these comments about the way that they prepared for the Utah quarterback situation.
For the most part, we prepared for both quarterbacks, I would say. Mostly Wilson, but yeah, mostly Wilson, but we were ready for both of them.
So, again, all of our hand-wringing and shaking our fists and shouting at the clouds about, well, there's no reason to be secretive about who your starting quarterback is. That's a defensive player from your rival who says most of the week they were preparing for Isaac Wilson. And then, of course, Brandon Rose trotted out there. Now, maybe that was a big reason why the first half was so smooth for Brandon Rose, or at least was part of the reason. Maybe it took some time for them to adjust to it being Brandon Rose. And these are the reasons why I debated even playing that sound, because you don't want to reinforce the secrecy.
No.
But that's why. That's why they never tell you anything. They never tell us anything, because they don't want Isaiah Glasker to know who's going to start, and they don't want Kalani Sitake to be like, all right, we're definitely not going to have to prepare for Isaac Wilson this week because it's going to be Brandon Rose. Make them split the reps in their own practice on whether they think it's going to be Rose or Wilson. And whatever that adjustment is, I don't think they're different enough players that you had to do much, but I just thought that was an interesting little anecdote as we still digest how it went down in the Holy War.
Yep, I agree. And it's like, what if we saw Isaac Wilson versus BYU? Do you think that outcome would be really different?
I don't. I mean, there's no reason, first of all, just looking back and saying the what if that is painful enough for Utah fans. But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't know if they're different enough as players. Brandon Rose turned the ball over a couple times, right? Isaac Wilson, that's one of the reasons you didn't know if he was going to be the guy moving forward, because he hasn't been able to take care of the ball all that well. I don't know if Brandon Rose was significantly better or significantly worse than Isaac Wilson, but in the second half, would Isaac Wilson have come in and found a way to score points? Why would we say that definitively when what we have on tape is the Utah offense struggling with Isaac Wilson in there or with Brandon Rose in there? That's why you went to somebody different in the first place. So it's an overall offensive problem. It's not just your quarterback, but those quarterbacks are not different enough, in my opinion, to say, well, one guy would have saved you and the other guy just didn't. I want to remind everyone we have a great partnership going on with Farmer and Chemist down there in historic Midvale. CBD products, CBN products. They got gummies. They got tinctures. They've got everything you need if you're looking to alleviate some of that anxiety. Maybe you're having a hard time sleeping. If you've got chronic pain issues, they helped my wife out. They helped Alonzo, our executive producer, out. They've helped out a lot of people here in the ESPN 700 family with some of those Farmer and Chemist products. And they are pharmacist directed, so it's a higher quality product. Everything is vetted through the state. Everything is vetted from the source to the shelf, and of course, right there into your home. farmerandchemist.com, 20% off if you mention ESPN 700 in store or in the online orders, and we'll be giving away Farmer and Chemist gift cards in the trivia section today. All right, got to take a break. Hour number 2 begins with Alex Markham from Rivals. He's a Utah insider. We'll see what kind of insight he might have on whether or not Brandon Rose is available for the Colorado game. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Utah.
Doing good, buddy. Yourself, man. Help me make this make sense, though, man. This has just been nuts this year. So
Well, okay, so you know me, I don't like to participate too heavily in the rumor mill. I try to make sure that my information is sourced. But sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of smoke around the idea that Brandon Rose might have sustained an injury late in that BYU game that is going to limit or eliminate his ability to play the rest of the year. What do you know?
yeah, as always, we got to be careful with what we talk about with injuries. But I mean, what I can tell you guys, I don't know how severe it was. Unfortunately, we'll find out. Maybe tonight, maybe game day. Obviously, game day Saturday, right? But it's open to interpretation whether he did something to his foot towards the end of the game, or it might have actually happened in the first half. Because if you go back and you look, he wasn't running as well in the second half. And so if that goes down, it's a huge blow to Utah's offense, because when it comes down to it, there's a lot of people that think that Isaac missed that game because he was hurt. Isaac missed that game because Brandon beat him out. Brandon was coming on strong for 3 weeks. That was the situation that everybody was excited about. Everybody was looking forward to. The team really rallied around Brandon, and so you hope it's something that he can just wrap up and get out there. Just initial signs just aren't seeming likely, unfortunately.
All right, so let's go two different directions here. Let's say that he can play. Let's say that Brandon Rose is able to get out there, but he's able to do it, with 1.5 legs. He's got one healthy leg and a foot that's bothering him, which means you're probably going to eliminate some of the QB run game. And as we saw with Cam Rising against Arizona State, it also affects the platform from which you throw. Now, Brandon Rose is not Cam Rising, right? Brandon Rose is not a guy that you ride with him if he's even 50%. So let's say that he is able to play, but he's going to be limited. How limited of a Brandon Rose do you think this coaching staff is willing to put out there? Does he need to be 90%, 80%, 70%? What do you think?
I mean, that's difficult because, there's different things, kind of different dynamics going on in the locker room right now that they've got to evaluate and just sit back and say, okay, what's worth it, what's not. But at the same time, too, Brandon Rose at 80%, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, again, he had been coming on strong, could have easily upset BYU had, maybe the play calling not gone as conservative in the second half, compared to how it was for that point in the first half. And it's tough to say, man. I honestly, if he's hurt decent enough, but he can still go, I still think that you have to go with Isaac.
Okay. And then let's say that Brandon Rose is out. All right. Now, Isaac Wilson has been asked to start games in a season where maybe he didn't expect to have to start games. Got thrown to the wolves a little bit as a freshman. Now, he's a competitor, so that's probably an opportunity he wanted. But then the Arizona State game, of course, Cam Rising is back, so you're Isaac Wilson. You take the back seat, say, all right, that's the guy. He's going. I understand. And then you go into this bye week, and you're excited to play potentially against the rival BYU, and you lose that quarterback battle. So now for the second time, maybe for a less understandable reason, you're benched. And now, if we're playing out this hypothetical, now Isaac Wilson could be asked again to start for a team because of an injury to a second guy who beat him out, basically. And we expect that he's going to be what? I mean, like a better version of what we saw before the bye week? What do you think? What's the mentality for somebody like Isaac Wilson given all of these roller coaster moves?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that, but I'm also going to kind of bring you back to an example from a few years ago, okay? So when Charlie Brewer was at Utah and started those first 2 games, Cam was beating him out in fall camp. It hit the point where Cam was about to be the starter. Cam had a rough couple of days of practice. Whittingham, just being kind of the cautious type that he can be sometimes, went with Brewer those first 2 games. We all saw how Cam responded from that. right? That's what you want to see in Isaac. You want to see him respond in a way where it's like, look, I had an opportunity. It was taken from me because somebody was playing better than me. But now it's my time to get in there and show my mental toughness and my it factor, my attitude, and carry these guys when, I keep losing guys around me too. I mean, that injury with Brant was huge, and so it's just, the hits just keep coming for these guys.
Well, you bring up a great point. Whoever it is, can be Batari or Wilson or Brandon Rose, and whoever that is now without one of the best offensive weapons. I think Mekhi Bernard's been your best offensive weapon this year. He's been your best, most consistent offensive player this year. Brant Kuithe is right there neck and neck, and now he's out. His career at Utah is over. You hope that his career at large is not over and that he'll be able to recover from this injury and play on Sundays at some point. But whoever it is going to be asked to go against a very high-powered Colorado offense and try to score with them and try to keep up with them, minus one of the most important offensive weapons that Utah football has had in the last decade. That's a tall task.
It's an extremely tall task, right? And, it doesn't matter how good Dorian Singer is. This offense revolves around Brant Kuithe. You saw that last game. As soon as he goes out, the offense crumbled. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to turn. And so I want to sit back and paint a rosy picture for Ute fans, but you very, very well might be looking at losing your next two games and hoping that you can save the season against Central Florida. It's how can they rally around each other? How can they figure it out? Last year with the Colorado game, you saw Batari just pretty much handed the ball off and ran it. You can't do that with Colorado right now. Colorado's healthy. Colorado's humming. So you really just got to hope that Isaac can get in there and, if just with everything that it's looking like, right, you got to hope that Isaac can get in there and really just knock down any kind of like frustration that could have been built up because of obviously, being overtaken for the starting spot, and get in there and just let it loose, not think, it's really hit that point in the season now where you can't think on those things. You just got to get back. You just got to let it fly. You got to take your risks, and that's what they're going to have to do in this game with everything that's got on.
Alex Markham is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, Utah Insider, and all Utes Insiders are brought to you by Metro Elevator. So if you live or work in a building with an elevator that is not cooperating, have the building manager call Metro Elevator, Utah's preferred vertical transportation experts, 801-946-7003. That's 801-946-7003. All right. We should look forward, but, I also like to look back. The holding call stole a lot of the attention and the conversation around this game. Look, that was a very serious issue, in my opinion. That was a moment that maybe should not have allowed BYU to have new life, but they did get it, right? The call was made, and so you got to find a way to go out there and get the stop. Your thoughts on that final BYU drive and the way it all played out after the holding call?
Yeah, there was a lot of frustration with everybody after the game, as evident of, Harlan and then Whittingham tossing the chair back. I want to give credit to Smith Snowden because how he handled himself in that press conference. You don't expect that out of a kid his age, just how he took the high road and everything. But, dude, that was one of those calls where I understand why they called it, but I also don't understand why they didn't let it go, because to me it felt like it was within the 5-yard cushion. I didn't feel like that there was contact enough on it, right? And I literally was sitting by some people and I just said, I was like, after that happened, I was like, this is not good because this defense has stopped them so many plays in a row. There's gonna be a big play that's hit. You can't just expect this defense to play lights out the way that they were and keep coming through. And, so they were put in an unfortunate situation from the refs, but also with how the offensive play calls were being done. It was extremely conservative, in the second half. And so everybody can sit back and fuss and argue about, the holding call or even that timeout, right? But look, Utah shouldn't have been put in that situation. They played a great first half. Great first half. And credit to BYU for the defensive changes that they made in the second half. But that never should have had to come down to a controversial call. That's my view of it. But it's just it's tough, man, because you can sit back and watch that constantly. It's like most refs probably would not call that play, and especially in a moment like that.
I've seen Joel Klatt say as much. I saw Rick Neuheisel talking about the ways that you can fix something like that. And it's really interesting because at the end of the day, right, there's been games in which Utah has been the beneficiary of a controversial call.
100%, yeah.
And look, even in this game, I've had this conversation with some BYU fans already where Glasgow and the face mask penalty on Glasgow in the first half that extended a drive that Utah ended up scoring on was probably – it looked like he grabbed the top of the shoulder pad, maybe not a face mask. And then people were saying, oh, it's a makeup call. The makeup call for me was the roughing the passer on Keanu Tanuvasa on the out-of-bounds hit on Jake Retzlaff, which was
right.
not roughing, was not unnecessary roughing.
Right.
But
exactly.
these referees are human, and as our players, you got to find a way to make that extra play. BYU made those extra plays. They found a way to win. They've found a way to stay undefeated. Their morale is at an all-time high. Everyone in BYU Nation feeling good, feeling great. This Utah fan base showed up for the Holy War game. This Utah team showed up for the Holy War game. And I spent 2 weeks, bye week and game week, talking about how if you can't win against BYU, it is over. The bottom falls out of the season. And to the credit of the team and the players, they don't listen to idiots like me. And they showed up ready to go. They showed up passionate. They looked like a Utah football team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Is any of that left after the disappointment from BYU and the loss? After potentially, not even potentially, definitely one major injury, season-ending injury to one of your best players and a team captain, and maybe your starting quarterback. Is any of that left? Can we realistically expect that this team will come out with the same kind of fight against Colorado that we saw against BYU?
That's tough. That's tough because honestly, man, I don't see it. There's enough issues that have gone on within the locker room this year that, you go through a situation like that, and I just don't see it unless the guys want to get up because they're playing Coach Prime and because of, the arrogance of Shadir Sanders and wanting to take it to him. Those are things that can factor in. The fact that you get to go up against a guy that's going to be a Heisman Trophy finalist and Travis Hunter. Those are big things, right? But the morale of the locker room has not been good the last little while this year. So it's, can they rally around each other after something like this? More often than not, they're 1-5 in conference now. It's like you're gonna feel defeated on it, and then you just lost one of the best leaders on your team. And so your leaders of all people keep dropping like flies, even, right? And then it was just crazy, right? Because it's like, you look back at the BYU game, and you tell me, but the flow to the offense with Rose was so much better. I heard that there was so much excitement just around the fact that Brandon was going to get his first start. And again, that's nothing against Isaac. Brandon's been around the program. Everybody loves Brandon. Everybody was eager and excited for Brandon, especially after that was ripped from him last year, right? And so the fact that if Rose absolutely doesn't play, which again, I don't think he will, that's just another hit to him that it's just like, and you and me grew up playing sports, man. It's just, you can only take so many of those mental hits before you're completely defeated. It doesn't matter how strong of a person you are.
And look, Coach Witt said in the presser yesterday, love these players, love the way that they've responded to this, the most frustrating season that he's had. But I'm with you. I don't know how much further you can keep asking that over and over again. And by the way, the Keithy going out now extends. This is the weirdest streak. You're going to play an entire season of Utah football without a single game where all captains are healthy.
That's nuts, man. Did you look that up, or who looked that up? That's crazy.
Well, just this year, you haven't had one game where every captain's been able to play.
This year. Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. I thought you were saying going way back. I'm like, wow.
I mean, but, if it's ever happened before, I don't know. I don't even know how you would find that. You'd have to you have to really comb through the record books. But I bet there's not very many seasons, if there's been any, where you've had 12 games without all four captains being available. It feels like an absolute snake bit type of situation. All right, big picture, long term. I ask this. I'm probably going to ask you this every time we talk from now on. Kyle Whittingham is potentially 3 games away from decision-making time. One part of me says there's no way he's going to walk away having the worst season of his career. There's no way he's going to walk away having lost to BYU 2 straight times, having missed the conference championship and the college football playoff and falling short of expectations. But the other side of me sees how fed up and frustrated he is and says that guy's got all the money he needs. He's got a great family. He's got grandkids he wants to spend more time with. Maybe he just throws up the peace sign and walks away. What's more likely right now in your mind?
Oh, man, that's honestly, it's so tough because the last time we talked and you asked me that, I mean, we had been hearing that this was his last year, going into the season. And, we all know his, pride and his ego in a good way, right? Where it's just like, he's so determined, wants to go out on top. He's so competitive, right? That there's so many times where I just sit back and I think like, he can't go out this way. This is going to be probably like the second or third time where he was about to retire and then change his mind again, right? Which again, nobody will ever force him out. Nobody will ever blame him on anything, but just seeing him in that press conference, and then seeing how he was with the chair afterwards, you got to start wondering if it's really racking his brain where it's like, is this worth it? Do I really want to keep dealing with this stuff? Is the NIL era just more stress than I even want to deal with as well? Because look, Utah's not in a good situation with that, regardless of every effort that everybody's tried to do with it. It's not a good situation. It's something that they need to keep trying to figure out. And when the player salary caps come, it's going to make it better. But by that time, you need to have somebody, and no offense to Kyle, a little bit different, that can pivot and adjust and be able to get that stuff going. And so to me, in my opinion, with every great thing Kyle has done, I would hope for Morgan's sake that at very minimum, if Kyle does not fully step away, Morgan gets that much more responsibility. And it's the next year, it's like, okay, guys, publicly, absolutely, this is my last year. That's why Morgan is doing this, this, and this. He's going to act as a head coach in these certain capacities so that he's ready for the next year. It's hitting that point, and it sucks to say it because he's such a legend, right? But it's, again, nobody's going to tell him what to do. And he changes his mind, man. It's just, it's that competitive fire in him. It just depends.
Always appreciate your insight, my friend. Thank you.
You too, buddy. Thank you.
That's Alex Markham, UteNation.com. A Markham Rivals on Twitter if you're not already following. Up next, some red and blue. Greg Wrubell is going to stop by. I wonder if Greg Wrubell has taken a test drive in the Warner Ineos Grenadier. I would like to see that guy in the darkest blue they can find, right? Get Greg Wrubell behind the wheel of some cool sport utility, stripped down, like overperforming off-road kind of situation. You're up in the mountains. You see the voice of the Cougs just rallying by, splashing mud from the tires of a Warner Ineos Grenadier. BYU fans could get on board with that. Utah fans would at least take that as a funny story from when they were up in the mountains. These cars are great. I've been telling you for weeks and weeks. Head turners aesthetically, but more importantly, they are big-time performers, and you need that now. Look outside the window wherever you're at. You need four-wheel drive. Warner Ineos Grenadier. The Ineos Grenadier has full-time four-wheel drive. They've got available locking differentials, built and actually a little overbuilt to perform in these hills, these foothills, these trails, and certainly on these slick roads and highways. 2400 South, 5600 West Tell them that OC sent you out at the Warner Ineos Grenadier dealership. Take the test drive today. Go to WarnerIneosGrenadier.com. Greg Wrubell, voice of the BYU Cougars. A magical season for Kalani and company. What's the secret sauce? Maybe Greg knows. We'll find out next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Utah ESPN Radio Network. For a long, long time, Greg Wrubell, kind enough to join us. Greg, how are you? Welcome to the show.
What's up, OC? Good to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. So, trying to get to the bottom of this magical season for BYU football. Now, love Kalani Sitake. He was my position coach for a short time at the University of Utah. I've known him since then. A great man, a wonderful leader. It's amazing to see him have this success. For every other team in college football right now, it feels like with Oregon, you say, oh, they're an undefeated team, and we can attribute a lot of that to NIL. And, of course, Dan Lanning's a great coach, and they recruit incredibly well. And you can kind of pick and pull with all of these other teams that are having magical seasons like BYU is, and you can say, well, it's because they've thrown so many resources into the football program. It's because they're a blue blood. It's this or it's that. And for BYU, it's hard to even find the reason with the numbers why this season has been undefeated and has been so great. Do you have insight as to why this in 2024 has been such a magical season?
Well, it's not that BYU's without resources. Certainly they have some, but the case you mentioned of Oregon operates at a different level. I think what it comes down to with BYU is it's extreme balance right now. It's become a recent cliche phrase in football, right? It's complementary football. They use it a lot, but it's really a thing with this BYU team. They may not have the 1,000-yard receiver, 1,000-yard rusher, 3,000-yard passer this year that you might see from some of the shinier teams in college football. But what they do have is an offense that was clipping along between, 30 and 40 points a game every game until the Utah game. And I expected it to be a lower scoring game, OC. I mean, Utah's defense has been and is as real as it ever was. It's the number one third down defense in the country. They're right there in scoring defense in the top 15, total defense in the top 15. They're a top 10 possession team. That's a hard team to score on, okay? But BYU was going to have to win a lower scoring game, and they did that. Yet BYU's offensive numbers are good, kind of good across the board. They struggle on third downs, struggled mightily on third downs against Utah, but BYU's offensive numbers are good. The defensive numbers are really good or much better. Then the special teams numbers have really been a difference maker. 3 special teams touchdowns, 2 defensive touchdowns. So BYU scoring in ways other than on offense. You throw these things together, and BYU has a really solid team across the board without blowing you away in any one category. Now, I would say that the interceptions number is a blowaway category. That's 16 picks on the year among 11 guys, and that's second nationally in interceptions. And so, yeah, they are ball hawks. They are taking it away at a higher rate. The turnover margin number is big. It's good, and it helped BYU defeat Utah on Saturday. But I go back to my point to OC that this is a team that kind of does it in all 3 phases at a pretty equal level, with Jay Hill's defense being the true standout unit along with special teams.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see the growth of that. First year under Jay Hill, I think a lot of folks expected it to be kind of an instant fix, and unfortunately it wasn't. But then the second year, to what you just mentioned, it is a balance all across the board. They're not reliant on one particular standout player to always make these plays. They've spread the turnover creation around. And I asked this question heading into the rivalry game, and obviously didn't have a chance to talk to you then, but I want to pass it to you now. If I take the quarterbacks out of the equation, because quarterbacks are always the most important player on the field, but who is the best player individually on this BYU team if it's not Jake Retzloff?
Man alive. Isaiah Glasgow is going to be in the mix, right? He's an impact linebacker. Stands out in so many ways. I think Isaiah gets in the mix along with Jacob Robinson if I were to pick 2 defensive players. And on offense, the 2 wide receivers, Lassiter and Roberts, have been such a dynamic 1-2 punch for BYU there. They've had hints of L.J. Martin. He and Hinckley Ropati were a pretty good duo this past weekend against Utah, doing what they could against a really good rush defense. But I think that Jake Retzloff being able to lean on those 2 guys, Lassiter and Roberts, has been as responsible for BYU's success as anything. And I know I'm expanding my list. You wanted one guy, I've given you 4 or 5. But the offensive line was last year a letdown, right? It was expected to be good and was kind of a weak point last year. Caleb Etienne is a great story at left tackle. He was a right tackle last year that was in and out of the lineup and was bounced over to the left to replace an NFL left tackle in Kingsley Suamataia, and he has been tremendous. Certainly a big pickup out of Oklahoma State. that last year you wondered, well, what did they see there? And then this year shows exactly what they thought they had in Caleb Etienne. So I gave you a few different guys in different spots, and I apologize for not sticking to one guy. But those names all jump to mind. And, again, it kind of speaks to how I have to kind of go different places across the board to tell you why BYU is good.
Yeah, it's a continuation of the theme that you're not relying on any one player. With that offensive line, Little Bird told me that Connor Pay is going to be available this week. The unit has been playing well even in his absence. How will that be managed?
Yeah, with Connor Pay, you had a solid 7. Without Connor Pay, you were down to 6. And on some weeks, you might have been down to 5 due to various injuries. But I think they're back up to 6 or 7 this week. And the Braden Keim situation, we wait to see how that looks. It didn't look good on Saturday night when Keim went down. And he's been the bookend to Caleb Etienne. And so if they were to have to deal without Braden Keim, that would be a blow. But losing Connor Pay was going to be a blow. And somehow they made it through the last month and a half and kind of picked up where he left off. Kudos to Coach Woods and this group, because they didn't lose a lot when they lost a really, really good player in Connor Pay. You just don't lose Connor Pay and not feel it. They felt it. But with Bruce Mitchell and Sonny Makassini and Austin Liusa, they've been able to use those 3 guys for those 2 spots at center and right guard to almost not miss a beat with Connor Pay gone. And, again, we wait to see the Keim situation, but I think if he's not able to go, Isaiah Jada, the Colorado transfer, who was a backup left tackle, played the right end, the right edge last week against Utah and did well. He'll be in the mix along with those guys I just mentioned to help fill the gap, if there is a gap to be filled, as we wait to see what happens with Braden Keim.
Greg Wrubell, voice of the Cougs, is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about the recent Holy War and BYU's outlook as they move forward. I got to ask you, that 4th down and 10, sometimes the play-by-play guy sees the flag right away, knows it's there, knows why it's there, and sometimes you're looking and going, oh, wait, what happened? Okay, there's laundry on the field. Which of those scenarios unfolded for you on Saturday night? Did you see the penalty? Did you see the play unfolding and know that, oh, this one's coming back? Or how did it go in the booth for you?
Well, I'm the kind of play-by-play guy, OC, that tends to follow the ball. And the ball was in Jake Retzloff's hands. I was focused on that pocket that was coming in on Jake. I was focused on how close he was to the goal line. I was looking for a potential safety. I was seeing it all happen at the goal line. That's where my attention was entirely. So I was really ball-focused and QB-focused in that moment. And because if the ball doesn't leave his hand and he goes down there, the game is over. And so in that moment, the game is over. Because he's down at the 1-yard line on 4th down, the Cougs can stop the clock one time. There's less than 2 minutes to go, so the game is over, right? Utah can take knees and end it unless the game is extended. And my spotter points out the flag at the top of the field. I did not see the flag. I didn't see it thrown. I wasn't watching the route. I didn't notice it. And then when he points out the flag, well, then where it was thrown, and if you watch enough football, OC, right, if you see a flag at that part of the field near the boundary, you kind of know who threw it, and you knew what he was looking for. And so that's almost always a hold in that spot. And that's what I expected, and that's what we saw. And I think you can watch X number of replays on social media to find out, what the official thought he saw and what he did see. So he sees a hold, he throws the flag, but it wasn't something I saw in the heat of the moment until the aftermath. And then once that's done, BYU's still inside its own 20, right? They've got to go 60-ish yards to get into field goal range without the benefit of a timeout. And you're doing it against Utah's defense. I think Kyle Whittingham was right on when he said post-game, we were playing lights out until that last BYU possession. And I think when he says lights out, I'm pretty sure he was referring to his defense, because they were. That was as good a defense as BYU has seen all year, and as good a job as anyone's done on Jake Retzloff and the offense all year. So, yeah, from lights out to get a stop. And somehow, without a timeout, they went 55-plus yards in 3 plays in less than a minute to put themselves in a spot where they needed to be. But until that time, I mean, think of the previous drives, OC. BYU was backed up inside of its own, 30-35, most of that fourth quarter, not going anywhere. And so they had the same situation. Now they had to go somewhere quick, and they did. So they flipped it around at the most imperative time, at a time when Utah was locking it down on BYU's side of the field defensively.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's not a popular thing to say on the home of the Utes, but the hold is certainly a story in this game. The bigger story is that BYU offense was able to march down and get into field goal range when it mattered. And when, Chase Roberts made that unbelievable catch, and then Hinckley Rapati gets around the right side for 13, 14 yards. I mean, those were big-time plays in a big-time moment. And I just keep going back. I watched the game twice now. I just keep going back to Jake Retzlaff. And like we already talked about, statistically, he's like middle of the Big 12 conference. He's like the 8th best quarterback in a numbers standpoint. But the guy just makes the plays. Sometimes with his legs, that wasn't necessarily the case in the Utah game. Sometimes with his arm, that certainly was. And obviously his teammates believe in him. He's got the kind of moxie that we talked about so often with Cam Rising in a Utah uniform. You've been around this program a long time. You've gotten to know a lot of these quarterbacks, the good ones and the not so good ones that have come through. What is it about Jake Retzlaff, who, he comes from outside the BYU culture, about as far outside of it as you can, has been well publicized, and here he is, a BYU hero with everything to play for in 2024?
Well, it won't surprise you to hear me say that I'm a huge fan of Jake Retzlaff, but it goes back to really the first post-game conversation we had with him, and it came after a game in which BYU got shellacked in Morgantown last year. It was his first start, and it did not go well. And that was the first of 4 starts that did not go well because he went 0-4 in those games. But from that first post-game conversation, I think Hans would agree. If you talk to Hans, he would agree and kind of say the same thing, that, yeah, BYU lost, and he did what he could, but he wasn't great, but nobody was. But, man, he gave you the vibe of a winner and a guy that was, couldn't have been less happy with how things went. But you could feel a fire in the words he shared on the headset from field level after that game. And I knew there were physical tools that would show themselves. You don't put up the kind of numbers he had at JUCO and not be a good quarterback, a good thrower of the football, a good player of the position. But he was giving us the other things you wanted to see and hear from a quarterback. The question was, when would it come? Well, it comes this year. And he really kind of came into his own, you could argue, once he'd played or started about 12 games. Well, what's 12 games? That's a season. Mm-hmm. You go 4 games last year, 8 games this year, and now he's looking like a guy. But A-Rod says, let's not be surprised here. He went through what everybody went through. Once you're about 12 games in, yeah, you're going to see some things that make you go, this is a player, and he is. Now, how do you judge a quarterback? Well, yeah, you want to see the yards, and that's important that he put up numbers, but does he get you into the end zone? Does he lead you to scores? And he's a top 25 quarterback nationally right now, OC, in points responsible for per game. He's also a top 25 quarterback in passing touchdowns. He makes the big throws at the important time. He's a top 15 guy in yards per completion. He can make a good throw and a big throw and a long throw like he did to Chase Roberts on Saturday against Utah. So he does the important things you want. And when you combine the fact that he's a really good runner, and until about 2 games ago was BYU's leading rusher on the season still, he really is the complete package. He may not be entirely prototypical, either in his height or in his background relative to how you get to BYU as a Jewish quarterback out of California, but these are also reasons why I love the guy. It's just such an atypical story in a lot of ways, and the word gamer is kind of out there and could mean any number, but he is that guy. He is a gamer, and he's the guy you want as your quarterback in a game like that on Saturday, but in any game, really. And heading down the stretch, they're going to lean into and lean on Jake Retzlaff as much as anybody to get them to the finish line.
What's the scariest game down the stretch with 3 left in the regular season, at least for BYU?
It's Kansas, and then I'm going to say Arizona State, and then next week I'm going to say Houston because I don't think there's an easy game in the Big 12. I mean, I just don't. Utah, the record is what it is, but we all know. I mean, that was going to be a grind, and it was. The 0-7 team in the Big 12 almost beat BYU in Provo. That's Oklahoma State. So where's the easy game? There's not. You go to UCF. Utah's going to finish with UCF to end the year. Well, is there a better running back than R.J. Harvey right now in the country? There's so many landmines and pitfalls in every week's game. There's just not those teams where you go, well, that's a W. I just don't feel it with this year's conference. I don't. And so Kansas, that's as scary a 3-6 team as you want to see right now. They put up 45 on Iowa State. on the weekend. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about Iowa State as being one of the best defenses in the conference, if not nationally. And now KU scores 45 against that team, and they're kind of rolling. And Devin Neal is a 4,000-yard running back, and they've got that guy coming in. Then you got to go on the road. You probably get Scadaboo, and you're playing away from home. Arizona State, you've seen them. And then, well, Houston, what Houston did to Utah opened a lot of eyes, and that's how BYU has to finish. So, yeah, the fact is BYU has to win 2 games in the final 3 to mathematically lock down a spot in Arlington. They might be able to get in at 1 and 2 based on tiebreakers, but 2 and 1's a lock and 3 and 0's a lock. But just getting 2 of these last 3, that's much easier said than done, because I just don't see a soft spot even down the stretch in the Big 12.
Well, as I've said, even the reddest part of me can't root against Kalani Sitake and against Aaron Roderick and Jay Hill and Chad Kaha'a and all these guys that I know from my own time.
And Sione Puha.
And Sione Puha. I mean, the list goes on, right? I mean, Tyus Moy, who's one of the analysts on the staff, is a good buddy of mine. So
Braylon Singleton.
They're all amazing people. I want them to be successful. Yeah. It feels icky to even bring money into a conversation in a magical season, but I'm kind of an icky guy, so I'll bring it up. Retention is a big thing in modern college football. Retention of a coaching staff that can do this, and obviously of the players because of NIL opportunities. There's not an individual on this roster, on this coaching staff right now, who wants to go anywhere, who wants to leave. But dollars and cents do become a factor, especially when we get to the postseason. Will BYU, will the NIL opportunities at BYU, will the school with the coaches' salaries, will everyone step up in order to keep this magic going, if that's what it takes?
Well, I think BYU has and will continue to do just that. I think what's happening with basketball is an indicator that resources will be properly allocated to get and keep BYU where it wants to be. I think Kalani, and I'm not going to even pretend to speak for his heart and his thoughts, but in his initial press conference, I believe, in being introduced as head coach at BYU, he talked about, maybe wanting to be the Polynesian Lavelle, kind of tongue in cheek at the time, but I think there's a truth in that matter in how the two gentlemen present themselves, coach their teams, lead their organizations, and the hearts inside both those guys. And they're both so genuine and so real and so universally beloved. And I think that's fair to say, OC. In college football, it's hard to be universally beloved as a head coach, right? Everyone knows someone's going to have something out for you at some point. But Lavelle was kind of that guy, and I think Kalani's that guy. And I would hope that BYU does whatever it can to keep Kalani in a position to have a Lavelle-like tenure at BYU and really be that guy. And I think it's a great poetry and symmetry that, he was a player for Kalani. His last game as a player was Lavelle's last game as the coach.
Yeah. They
went out together. And so much of what Lavelle was is ingrained in Kalani's coaching tactics and even their personalities. While they're different, right? Lavelle was a little more somber and subdued, but still incredibly witty and affable and loving. And Kalani's more of an energetic guy, a dancer and all that, but the love and the affability and the realness and the genuineness, that's all there. They really share a lot of common characteristics. And so I think it's really cool how Kalani in a lot of ways kind of takes the baton a couple of coaches removed and kind of a generation removed from Lavelle and does a lot of what Lavelle is doing as head coach.
Well, we're up against the break here. I could keep picking your brain about everything going on down there in Provo because it's not just football, basketball with a great outlook. You got volleyball and soccer and all these things going well. So enjoy it, and thank you again for your time.
Well, I know it's the home of the Utes, and I'm sure when a lot of folks hear that Greg Wrubell's coming on, they're gonna maybe find something else to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes. But I hope those that stuck around enjoyed the conversation because I enjoyed talking with you. And whenever you want me on, I'll come on and we can chat about anything you want to. It's been my pleasure.
That's Greg Wrubell, voice of the Cougs, and really a master of the play-by-play craft because it's not just football he does. He does a great job on football and basketball and on several of the quote-unquote non-revenue sports, and he dives in with passion. That's a guy who's in the right job and the right career for himself. That's the guy who found his calling, all right, to be the voice, not just of any school, but of BYU. Big thanks to Greg Wrubell for giving us some time. All right, Jeff Schwartz is going to join us in about 6 minutes. We're going to talk to farmer and chemist next. Sean O'Connell Show rolling on a Tuesday on ESPN 700. cannabis products. farmerandchemist.com. Mention ESPN 700 for 20% off. We'll be giving away a gift card in about 50 minutes. Jeff Schwartz joins us next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Utah ESPN Radio Network. Welcome to hour number 3 on the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll start hour number 3 with my good friend Jeff Schwartz and then Belle Fraser to talk a little Utah Hockey Club. They're in action tomorrow night. Jeff Schwartz joins us now. Hey, buddy. What's up?
What's up, my friend? How we doing?
You know, no one's feeling as good as types right now. That's for sure.
I mean, sure, I guess. I just playing Maryland did nothing for me. Like it moved me zero. I feel no different about anything with Oregon playing Maryland.
Well, nobody does, but that's conference realignment for you. And at least your team is winning. I don't want to talk about the Ducks right now. I want to talk about the ending of the Utah BYU game. I know that it's a big ask for you to stay up past. You would have to be awake until like 2 a.m. to catch the end of this game in the Eastern time zone. But the way it worked out, as you're well aware, Utah gives up a late field goal, 3 seconds left. That's the end of the game effectively. The 4th and 10 with about a minute, whatever it was, a minute 30 left. And the holding call is the kind of controversy, the debate that is certainly circulated here locally. But, you know, Rick Neuheisel got involved. Joe Clack got involved. I wanted your thoughts on the penalty, the call, everything.
So I did not stay awake, by the way. Last night, the Monday Night Football game, Sean, I was jarred asleep when my iPad, I was watching the game in bed, fell off my chest and hit the ground because I fell asleep at some point in the middle of the third quarter. So there was no chance I was there for the Holy War as much as I wanted to. And Utah got off to a great start, obviously. I went to bed, it was 21-10. I was excited for Utah. Look, I am team no penalties, right? I want no penalties in a game. If we have a game with 0 penalties, that's my favorite type of game because that means, A, you typically are going to have players that are playing using really good technique and form, right, and executing at a high level, and you have officials that are not looking to throw penalties. I think the problem is officials far too often look to find penalties instead of just calling what they see, right? I think we see that quite often, but holdings, pass interferences, roughing the passer, sometimes you're like, did you actually see the play? Like, what did you watch the play? Or do you just sort of, do you have to call a roughing that anytime a quarterback gets hit hard? So the play that happened at the end there, you know, I think TV does us injustice sometimes about realizing what officials are looking at and where they're positioned on the field, right, Sean? So the ESPN feed was from, you know, the high 50-yard line, correct?
Yeah.
And you're looking down, and from that angle, it does not look like a hold. I agree with that. But then you see some fan videos and some other videos, and the wide receiver was held. Now, the question becomes, how much was he held? Did it affect the play? And should a ref be thrown the flag in that moment? And I go back to the idea of like, what is the ref looking at? So if he's looking directly at that wide receiver, he seems being held. He's not looking at the quarterback. The quarterback wasn't even looking to the left. He was looking to the right. He wasn't looking at that guy. But the referee is not seeing that, right? He's not responsible for making sure the play, you know, that specific flag he's throwing matters for the play or not. Was the wide receiver held? Was he not held? I think he was held, Sean. If you want to say that gets called 5% of the game, sure. Did it affect the play? No. Did the wide receiver really ever have to slow down? No. His feet were running the entire time. I mean, so look, technically it was a hold. I prefer games don't end or I guess get extended on penalties like that. But, and I was texting you with this earlier today, like the fact is Utah's offense shut down the second half, and that's the reason they lost. And by the way, BYU still had to go, another 60 yards to get a first down to be in the field goal range?
Yeah, they were on their own 20-yard line, basically, yes.
So I know that officials are easy targets, and I understand Mark Harlan's anger. It's been a really hard season for Utah, and if you recall, remember last year the Chiefs had lashed out the officials like week 12 or whatever it was, like just Mahomes was yelling at the officials and he was yelling at the officials because sometimes they're just easy targets, right? He's not going to yell at Kyle Whittingham. It's not Kyle Whittingham's fault, right? It's not going to yell at Cam Rising being hurt again, or it's just you just yell at the officials. They're easy targets, and I thought that in that moment, I thought Mark Harlan was just sort of venting his anger on the season, but just at the officials, and he get fined, and he'll move on. It is interesting though, Sean. We talked. I would say that what % of our discussion was about Pac-12 officiating over our 6 years? Like 10%. I mean, way too much. We talked about Pac-12 officiating. It's bad everywhere. It's bad in the Big Ten. It's bad in the Big 12 and the ACC.
And by the way,
NFL, it's bad.
The head official in this game was an old Pac-12 official.
Yeah, I mean, and then the thing that we have to not do, Utah fans, we can't do whataboutism, right? We can't find another play and say, why didn't they call this a holding? Why? Like I saw a Utah account put out like this. It was great. I'm sure you saw the video of he accused 3 BYU offensive linemen of holding on that 4th down play, when in fact the only penalty I saw was a Utah linebacker punching a BYU running back in the face. Like, that was the penalty I saw on that play that was uncalled. Like, it's not why Utah lost. The offense shut down the second half, but it was a penalty. And again, we can argue semantics of should have been called, should have not been called. What's the protocol there? But just like in the Super Bowl when there was that holding called on James Bradbury against the Chiefs, like the official's looking right at that wide receiver. If he sees a restriction of that shoulder pad by the defensive back, he's going to call holding. Those are the rules. Now, the difference in college and NFL is in college, you can have your hands on a wide receiver the entire time till the ball is thrown. In the NFL, you can't do that past 5 yards. So it's a little bit different. But, Sean, I thought it was a holding. I don't know how your crowd feels about it, you feel about it. I don't even know what Neuheisel or Joel Klatt said, but to me, it was a holding.
Well, the obvious answer is, of course, Utah fans didn't feel like it was a hold. Look, it was a hold. It's a letter of the law hold. It's one of those things, like you're saying, where if you're looking at it in slow motion or you're looking at it up close, then, yeah, you're probably seeing a hold. The discussion, and I think the valid discussion, is whether or not it affected the play. And
it did not.
And that's why it's so hard for people to digest. But I'm with you. Like, there's still opportunities to win the football game.
Yep.
It's a big ask. Your defense has kept you in the game the whole time. Your offense dies in the second half. The very next play should have been an interception, and it went through the defensive back's hands. So, look, it's just one team is having a great season. The other team is having a terrible garbage season, and that has continued. You've been part of both. You've been part of great seasons and of garbage seasons. At one point, I know that it's not in the nature of coaches or of high-level players to quit, to say, all right, I can't handle this anymore. But it's also not, in my opinion, realistic to expect human nature to be completely absent from this scenario. They've got Colorado, then they've got Iowa State, then they've got UCF, and they've got those without Brant Keithy, who's now out for the rest of the year. Maybe Brandon Rose, the quarterback who started this game against BYU, potentially injured and out as well. So now you're back on this carousel, and the freshmen might be coming back in. At what point is it just like, whether player by player or unit by unit or even the whole team, it's just like, all right, not our year, let's pack it in?
I think it's a very natural feeling, especially in college sports, when you have young players that are 18, 22 years old. They're emotional and they have interest outside of football, right? When you're a professional football player, you're paid to play football. That's, and you're a professional, right? It's our life. I think it's really hard in a rivalry game like this, the way the Utah lost, to get up. Now, I think the coaching staff's still going to bust their butts to prepare a game plan. I don't think the players are going to try any less in practice, Sean. But what's natural is you go to Colorado. The game is super early, 10 a.m. kickoff, and let's say Colorado scores the first drive, and you have a 3-and-out, or you have a 3-and-out. They score, you have a 3-and-out. It's like the mindset. It kind of goes to like, well, here we go again, And when that sets in, it's really hard to overcome it. And I think that the discouraging part coming out of the BYU game isn't the loss. To me, it's the offense in the second half. In the first half, you're off a bye. And I think I talked about this previewing the game heading into the week. It's like I expected Utah's offense to be better in the first half. You're off a bye. You have time to prepare. Then what happens in the second half when you're off that opening script, right? When BYU is sort of seeing what you're trying to do offensively. So I think emotionally it is a really tough spot for Utah heading into this game. Defensively, they're still really good, but defense to me is always a more emotional position where like you need support of the offense to keep that emotion high. And when you don't have that, then defensively, we see this all the time. Like good defenses by the fourth quarter just start crumbling because they've been on the field too long and they're getting no help from the offense, a bad field position, like turnover. I mean, all these things start kind of rolling downhill for a defense. So I think it's a pretty tough spot, Sean. You had BYU, you lost, and then you go and you play a good Colorado team. Big New Kickoff there might be a reason why the kids are up, but I think it's a tough spot this weekend.
If you're a member of this coaching staff, at what point are you putting extra effort into retention and extra energy into, say, like making sure you pull the promising young players on this roster aside and be like, hey, it's a bad year, but we've got a plan moving forward. We've got concepts of a plan, however you want to phrase it, and we want to keep you here because you got to do damage control, I think, at some point. When do you have to start that with the transfer portal opening in less than a month?
Concept of a plan, that's funny. I think you probably – okay, the hardest part about this discussion is Kyle Whittingham, right, and what his status is heading to next season. But you have Coach Whitting on the staff, right, Sean? So to me, it's just you ask Morgan Scalley, like, how would you approach this? And you sort of go after, I think, how he would like to do this. And I think you have to play young guys now, right? You want to start playing the guys who have a future. You don't want to bench the older guys, I wouldn't say. You're not benching seniors, but you're starting to get some of the young guys some more run. They haven't played, right? If you play that last 3 games, you get to hold your red shirt for one more season. I think Utah would like to see young players because if you're heading into next season, you, of course, want those young guys to stay, to your point, to be motivated, to feel like you're all in on their ability to to help you next season. So I am curious if they start going to young guys at some point in the next couple of weeks. It would make sense, especially if they lose this weekend. Are they out of? No, they're still in bowl contention, right? If they lose this weekend, are they out of bowl contention?
They got to win 2 more games, so
yeah.
They would have to win against Iowa State and
yeah. But again, the bowl just basically is another month for young guys to play, right? Essentially, because all the veterans typically don't play in bowl games. So I think you start playing some of these young guys, man. I'm not sure, and I don't know who on the roster would qualify for that, Sean, but it would make sense if they started, giving young guys some more reps, especially guys who haven't played because of the red shirt.
Jeff Schwartz, our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, college football and NFL insider. He played at the high level in both of those situations. College football playoff rankings are coming out. Are we going to see a lot of movement, or because Indiana remained undefeated, BYU remained undefeated, and then obviously Miami lost their first game of the season? Where do you see the rankings coming out tonight?
Well, they don't have to do the rankings based off of the conference alignment, right? So they don't have to put like SMU 4, right? Yet, who might be the ACC champion at the moment. I mean, Colorado even could win the Big 12. I would imagine that it feels like voters have punished BYU, right, for their schedule and their wins. I don't know why that wouldn't change this weekend. You have a 1-point win against an unranked team on the road. I think people are waiting for BYU to sort of peter out. And you look at who's ahead of them. Georgia's ahead of them. I think that's the only team that's ahead of them that lost this weekend. So Georgia might fall behind them. I mean, they don't have much room to move up in my mind. So maybe they go to 8. But I could see them putting Georgia. This would be fun. So Indiana's 9-0. BYU's 8-0. The first 2-loss team is Alabama at 11. I wonder if they drop Georgia to. Wow, I'm kind of curious how far they drop Georgia here. It's kind of interesting. How they move Ole Miss up from 16 all the way up to 10 or something, but they're not moving Georgia all the way. They're going to drop Georgia all the way back, Sean, out of the top 12.
I don't know.
That feels like a tough decision to do tonight, because I think if we were starting the playoffs and we're listing teams we thought could win a championship, Georgia would still be on the top 3 teams that we thought could win a championship or think can win a championship. BYU, I'll tell you what, man, the game at Arizona State next week is going to be really interesting, Sean, because you know this, I know this, Utah fans know this. night games, or not even night games. Most of the time they're night games, but November games in the desert. Ooh, buddy. A lot of teams have gone down there and lost the opportunity to play in a playoff in Arizona. So tough place to play. That game to me stands out for BYU as potential like upset alert.
Weirdly enough, depending on what happens for Arizona State on the road at Kansas State this weekend, they're still in the running.
I know,
for a Big 12 championship appearance. So
yeah,
Kenny Dillingham, if he can get his crew dialed in on the road at K-State and then against BYU at home, then you've got the Territorial Cup against an Arizona team that I think is just floundering some. Like they could still be – we could be looking at an Arizona State-Colorado conference championship game still.
Which would be insane.
Just two Pac-12 newcomers playing for a Big 12 championship. That would be wild. Let's say BYU finishes out this regular season either as a one-loss team or undefeated. Let's say undefeated for the sake of the discussion. And then they lose in the conference championship game. In that case, it would have to be to Colorado because if they lost a game, it would probably be to Arizona State, whatever. In that case, with Miami's loss, with what's happening in the SEC, does it open up more of a possibility that the Big 12 could get even a one-loss runner-up into the college football playoff?
Good question. So BYU's best win would be Kansas State, right?
Or SMU.
Yeah, all the way back in week 2, huh?
As of last week, BYU was the only team that had two top 20 wins, besides Oregon and I think one other. But
Sean, I think it really depends on where the other conferences sit, right? Because you look at like there's probably 4 Big Ten teams. Unless Indiana gets boat raced by Ohio State in 2 weeks, and like they lose so badly that you're like, yeah, they've played nobody, and we just can't put them in 11-1. Penn State's in, Oregon's in, Ohio State's in. SEC's kind of a mess right now, but you figure that they're going to get 3 or 4 teams in. ACC, probably just one team because 2 lost Miami, probably not getting in, right? If they lose to SMU in the championship game. So, yeah, I mean, you got Boise. So that's at least 10. That's 10 right there. 4-4, 1-1. And then I guess, yeah, the Big 12 could see 2 get in. If BYU loses to Colorado and you put 10-2 Colorado and you put – we 11-2 Colorado and 12-1 BYU. Certainly possible. Yeah, I want to put it past the committee to do that. Depending on how the SEC breaks out, I could see 2 Big 12 teams being in there.
What's going on right now that Andy Reid is undefeated, and even on a field goal block, you can't beat this Chiefs team. And, of course, BYU's undefeated. It's like the year of BYU and BYU alum. What's happening?
Well, the only thing I'll say about Kansas City, Sean, is that this wasn't a missed kick. It was a strategically timed field goal block. They do get credit for that, don't they? Like they obviously saw a weakness. Former Oregon Duck, by the way, Forsyth got trucked on that kick. Chiefs go to Buffalo this weekend. Fun game. I mean, I think if they beat Buffalo, we can finally put to rest this idea like the Chiefs are the luckiest 9-0 team. They'll be 10-0. They basically have the 1 seed wrapped up already. I have a question for you. We've talked a lot about the 12-team playoff, is the inception of it. I've always thought, and I've said this many times, that this doesn't change who the champion is because it's typically one of the top three teams-ish, 2-3 teams. It does feel like this year, though, you can have an Ole Miss is get in as a 6 seed to make a run. Doesn't it feel like this is a year when Alabama, some of these teams outside the top 4, I think, have a chance to make a deep playoff run. I didn't expect that to start the season.
Yeah, I didn't either, but I guess I didn't give full credit to how many to the parity that we were going to see. I mean, I didn't think that we would see teams like Alabama with multiple losses, teams like Georgia with multiple losses. But the way it's been sitting, there's a lot of parity. And the other thing about it is I really do believe that one of those top 4 seeds ends up as the eventual champion, because having that week off is going to give people an opportunity to get healthy, get a little bit of rest. Everyone else is going to have to play, 4 straight games?
Yeah, it's hard.
Top 25 competition? How do you win those? So,
yeah,
I think that one of the top 4 seeds, one of the first round buys, still wins the national championship. And if that's, Colorado or Kansas State or BYU, then yeah, this situation has changed the outcome and changed the access and ability for championships across the board.
I think there's a small chance that Boise State could have a playoff bye.
How would that work?
The Big 12 kind of cannibalized itself down the stretch, and you have like a
so the highest ranked conference champion is not from the Big 12. It's Boise State from the Mountain.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
That would be Brett Yormark would.
I mean, they're not that far off, right? Boise State, BYU's 9. Boise State is 12.
Yeah, no, you're right. If BYU finds a way to lose, but here's the thing: if Colorado wins out and then wins the conference championship, they're going to leapfrog Boise State.
Probably, yes.
And people, well, maybe not though, because they want more games with Colorado for the television ratings, so they might not want to give Colorado the first round bye.
Yeah, I think Colorado might lose to Kansas in 2 weeks, but that'd be interesting to see kind of how that plays out.
Kansas has an opportunity to spoil a lot of things. They got BYU this week.
Oh yeah,
they got Colorado. So
they're three. Might be the best 3-6 team in the country.
They looked really good last week.
But they're not playing at home, which kind of worries me about like playing like a Colorado. Like you're playing at Arrowhead because their stadium is being redone right now. So that does worry me if you are kind of like looking for that home field advantage. If you're Kansas in that game, it's not going to be there.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out. Last thing before I let you go, because as always, I've just ignored clock discipline on the show today. I resolved that I'm going to be better. The Steelers win over the Commanders. Meaningful, a greater statement about either team, or just a fluke?
The Steelers do 3 things on offense, Sean. They run the football. They sort of move the pocket for Russell Wilson, right, via go routes and via like play action pass and move the pocket, and they go always to the right. Okay, it always looks right. And they run go routes. They do 3 things on offense. That's it, and they can't be stopped. Never seen anything like it. All their explosive plays are go routes. Just throw them slot, and for the most part, they're all slot fades. So it's wild, man. Like they just have this formula no one's stopping right now. And I thought Washington would win that game. They were close, but no cigar there. Jane Daniels, I think, is incredible, and that was a really tough spot for him as a rookie. Really good defense, and his offensive line had trouble blocking at certain points, but I think the Steelers just keep winning, man. Keep downing them. All they do is win, man. I don't know. I can't explain it.
Always a pleasure hearing from you, sir. Thanks for your time.
All right, talk to you later, buddy.
That's Jeff Schwartz, college football and NFL insider, longtime veteran of NFL football, playing offensive line, and, of course, a former Oregon Duck who's loving where that Oregon team sits right now. The college football playoff rankings that are going to come out tonight are going to once again see Dan Lanning's Ducks sitting atop the rankings. I am curious to see where Indiana and BYU are. I'm of the opinion that the further you get into an undefeated season, the more discussion should be had about whether or not you belong ranked higher than some of the one-loss teams, even if the one-loss teams in front of you did not lose. I don't think that's the only way that there should be upward mobility in, like, you shouldn't, if you're BYU, if you're Indiana, if you're Army, you shouldn't have to rely on people in front of you losing for your rankings to go up. I think that it's like compounding interest. The more undefeated weeks you can put together, the greater the return should be, because it's very, very difficult to make it 9, 10, 11 weeks into a season without sustaining a loss. All right, we'll switch gears. We'll talk a little Utah Hockey Club with Belle Fraser. Utah Hockey Club insider joins us next. They're back in action tomorrow night at the Delta Center. This team has had its share of injuries. They've had their cold streaks and their hot streaks. Which should we expect when they head back to home ice coming up tomorrow night? We'll get to that next on the Sean O'Connell Show. It's ESPN 700. anywhere. Time to talk a little Utah Hockey Club. Belle Fraser, Utah Hockey Club insider from the Salt Lake Tribune, joins us. Belle, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you. You enjoying your first real snowy day in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, it was funny driving to the rink this morning. I was like, oh, man, here we go. It's the start of winter. But I made it here, and it's pretty for now. I like it for now.
Okay. Yeah. You'll learn, especially if you have to drive around a lot, you'll learn to not love that part of winter here. But that's fine. I want to start this conversation. Very important personnel acquisition for Utah Hockey Club. Have you met Archie yet? Have you met the club dog yet?
Yes, so he was at practice yesterday. The team was doing 22 push-ups for the 22 and 22 challenge, which for Veterans Day, and Archie was there, and we all were petting him and everything, and then, 30 minutes later, the press release came out that Archie will be around a lot more often. So very exciting. He'll be with the team for 14 to 16 months while he socializes and learns, like basic commands. Then he'll go train with American vet dogs to eventually be paired up with a veteran or service worker with disabilities free of charge. So, great partnership for the team to do. And no one's complaining about having a cute little black Labrador retriever around. So it's a win-win for everyone. And Archie will be at the game on November 15th at Delta Center. He's going to do a meet and greet on the concourse. So any Utah Hockey Club fans that want to meet Archie, he will be there. And then he'll be at events throughout the season too. But very fun acquisition to kind of break up the news cycle for the team at least.
Go find pictures, videos, whatever of Archie. Actually, Belle's got some on her Twitter feed, so a great place to find him. He's absolutely adorable. Puppies make everything better, even hockey. Who knew? All right, let's talk about actual on-ice stuff. Looks like the Sergachev-Oli Mata pairing is going to be a feature moving forward. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that was new today in practice, and Coach said they're going to stick with that tomorrow. Michael Kessling had been playing on the first pair with Sergachev, but what Coach kind of explained today was that both of those guys like possessing the puck, and the team wants Sergachev to have the puck more because obviously he's their number one defenseman, a great puck mover, two-way defenseman, power play, penalty kill, and I think they just want him being a playmaker a bit more. So they put Oli Mata up there with him. And, we talked to Mata today, and he just had great things to say about Sergachev, saying he's one of the top D-men in this league. He's a good skater, understands the game well. And Mata's a veteran that kind of knows his place. He's more of a stay-at-home defenseman and can cover for Sergachev if he wants to push up in the play and things like that. And Coach also talked about they're focusing a lot on the underlying numbers. And while Kessler has been able to log the long minutes with Sergachev and keep up, just what they've been able to do with the puck isn't exactly, the most productive of what they want out of a first pair. So they're switching that up. And they're switching forward lines up too. I think when you get shut out twice in 1 week, you kind of look for changes, look for solutions. And they've definitely done that this week in practice. They had a day off and then 2 full practices before their next game. So I think that really helps the team. And yeah, you're going to see a little bit of a different look for the team tomorrow against Carolina.
So they're 1-2 in the last 3, and you mentioned a couple of shutouts. I don't know if this is the right attitude to have, but I look at 3-0 against Winnipeg, and I'm like, all right, well, that team's just on fire right now, off to the best start in NHL history. And then Nashville, who I thought made some big-time acquisitions in the offseason, was going to be a factor. It hasn't gelled. It hasn't come together for them. I thought Nashville was an opportunity for this relatively young squad to get a win over a team that's got some formidable veterans on it, and instead you lose 4-0. Those two, I mean, the results go down in the record book the exact same, but I thought that they were much different matchups. What happened against Nashville? Winnipeg, I kind of understand it. Nashville, I don't.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think the Winnipeg game, you obviously look at the score and it's 3-0, but I thought Utah didn't play poorly at all in that game. They stuck with it. I think it was 0-0 by the 30-minute mark. I think they played a lot better defensively for sure against Winnipeg, and they struggled with shots on goal. When you're playing a team that I think Winnipeg was averaging close to 5 goals a night, they kept them to 2, and then a third one was empty netters. So I think that's a game where this team isn't taking moral victories. Lawson Krause said it after that game, they want to win, but that's a game where you lose, but you build your game. And you can't really say the same about Nashville. I think I agree with you. That was an opportunity for them to build on their win in St. Louis. They won 4-2, played a pretty cohesive, complete game. And Nashville, you can't underestimate any team in this league, but they had lost 5 of their previous 6 games coming into the game on the 9th. And obviously they're playing with a level of desperation to win in front of their home crowd. But the main message from Coach this whole season has been consistency. Every time they win, he says, this will feel good for 2 hours and then midnight hits and this doesn't matter anymore. It only matters if you can string, those types of performances together throughout the season. And I think that's something we haven't seen from Utah yet, and something that they're really focused on doing is following up a good performance with another good performance. And, it's tough too because Nashville is a divisional opponent, and obviously those points feel insignificant now in November, but down the line, if Utah wants to make a playoff push, those 2 points or give or take to Nashville are going to hurt them in the end. And, Winnipeg's divisional too. So I think those are games that carry a lot more weight for them. And, they just fell off in Nashville. So I think it's good they had the mental and physical reset once they got home. And they know that's unacceptable. There's no one in that locker room making excuses for how they played, which I think is what you want. But yeah, just to fall off from the St. Louis game. And that's the struggle. That's their main struggle right now. The key word with this team has been consistency or lack thereof.
Bill Fraser, Utah Hockey Club insider from the Salt Lake Tribune, and my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Tomorrow night, Utah Hockey Club hosting the Carolina Hurricanes. They're top of the Metro Division. They are number 2 right now in the NHL in goal differential. They're not quite Winnipeg, but they're not far off either. What's going to be the toughest thing about this matchup in your mind?
Yeah, Carolina's also coming off of beating the Vegas Golden Knights 5-2. And they've won 4 of their last 5. So this is a really good team, and it doesn't stop for Utah. They play Carolina, then they play Vegas, then they play the Capitals, all at home. So I think, something that the players always say, and you can take it for what you want, but they're focused on the game within their own room and not the opponent. But this is a team where your defense is going to have to be the best it's been. And I think that they feel confident about where their defensive game is right now. Coach was kind of saying, our defensive game got better, but it sacrificed our offensive game, obviously getting shut out twice. So I think for them, it's shots on net. It's getting some production from their power play. They haven't scored a power play goal since the Calgary game, I believe. So that'll really be a necessity for them, just to have special teams work in their favor and then stay out of the box too. You saw last game for them. They took 3 penalties in the first period, and Nashville scored on 2 of them. So I think discipline, scoring on the power play, and scoring in general, and switching up the lines. They put Bukestad on the first line, Haytonstad on the third, and then they're keeping Carconi on the fourth line and going with 12 forwards. So I think they feel good about the load management on defense and are now focused on kickstarting their offense. So I think internally that's their main focus. And I think there's been a lot of talk about quantity of shots, but Coach has really stressed quality too. That even when they're not shooting a lot, he likes the chances they're getting, and sometimes they just aren't hitting the net, so it's not counting statistically. So I think that's something to watch out for too. But yeah, to win a game, you have to score, and I think that's the biggest point of concern and emphasis for the team right now.
I keep waiting for Sergachev's minutes to kind of taper off a little bit, for them to find a solution to having him, 25, 26. I think against St. Louis, he was 28 minutes on ice. And, depending on who you talk to around the NHL, he's a workhorse certainly, but the sustainability of that comes into question. Is it a necessity thing, or is this what Sergachev likes to do?
I think it's a bit of both. You talk to Sergachev, and he loves it. Especially, he talked about just getting more comfortable after coming back from injury last year. He had a pretty bad break in his leg, and he's logging these minutes, I just get more into the game. And, the fear and the hesitation that kind of started in the beginning of the season for me goes away when I play more. And, in a new system too, it's not easy to, switch teams and automatically know how the coach wants you to play and that type of stuff. So I think it's helped him feel more confident in his role with the team. And, a lot of those minutes just come from the fact that he's usually playing, he's always on the power play and on the PK too. So when they're taking, 4 penalties a game, he's logging extra minutes there. If they have a power play, he's logging extra minutes there. So I think part of it is just how versatile he is. They use him in absolutely every situation. And that's where it comes from. Ian Cole has been logging more minutes because of the penalty kill, but he's not necessarily out there in the last minute of the game or on the power play, so that's where it dwindles off. But, bringing in Ali Mata, that was one of the main things. Load management, he's come in and played more than 20 minutes tonight too. So I think having him on that pair will maybe help just evening out. But the team went with 7 defensemen for a few games just to get the minutes down. I think Sergachev played under 23 minutes for the first time this season last week. So they gave them if you call that a break, for a few games when they played 7 defensemen, but they're back to 6. The sustainability question is a good one, and he's proven he can do it thus far. And why stop playing your best defenseman if he says he can handle it, and he has proven he can. So, I think that's someone they're just going to ride for the whole season until, something changes in his durability.
Vejmelka is in goal tomorrow night. Is that right?
Yes, that's what Coach said today.
What should we expect from him making another start?
Yeah, I think Vejmelka too. You look at the games he's played in, and Coach talked about this in Winnipeg when they got shut out, that he felt bad for Vejmelka because he played a good game, but the team weirdly cannot score when he plays. He's played 11 periods so far. He came in and relieved Ingram one time and played 2 periods, and then he's had 3 starts. And through 11 periods of play, the team has been shut out twice and scored 1 goal, which is a wild number. I don't think the team plays differently in front of different goaltenders, but it's just an unfortunate stat that the games that Vejmelka has been in for, the team has not been able to produce. And, no matter how well the goaltender plays, if you're not scoring, you can't win the game, obviously, like we talked about. So I think for Vejmelka, it's just keep doing what he's doing. He's been pretty locked in. He only let 2 goals against the Winnipeg Jets team that, like you said, is number 1 in the league. So I think what you've seen from him is good. He talked about it just being a mental thing, staying ready. They haven't been rotating, but Coach said they'll probably use both of their goaltenders more towards the end of the month because they have some back-to-back. So I think this isn't the last time you'll see Vejmelka this month. But, yeah, from his individual game, it's really no concern. It's just, can the rest of the team support him? Can't have a good game in net and then not on the rest of the ice. So, I think they have confidence in him. It's just a matter of producing on the other end to make those performances matter for him.
Belle, appreciate your time today. See you at the game tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you.
Utah Hockey Club insider Belle Fraser talking about that Utah Hockey Club up and down season so far, and they've got a tough one tomorrow night against the Carolina Hurricanes, who are atop their division, and as I said, number 2 in the league in goal differential right now, playing great hockey and on a hot streak. So looking forward to going out to the game. Hopefully it's a full building. Hopefully it's a loud building again. If you have not yet had the opportunity to go out to the Delta Center for one of these Utah Hockey Club games, find a reason, find a time, find the money in the budget, go out and do it. It's an absolute blast, and it's something new in our community that NHL hockey, I just feel really excited that we still have it, that it's a reality, and that we're going to get it a new arena eventually for it. It's going to be awesome. All right, we'll talk with Spence Checketts next, and we'll do a little trivia. I've got Farmer and Chemist gift card to give away. I've got Jersey Mike's gift card to give away, and I think I have Papa Roach tickets. Yeah, Papa Roach. All that next on the Sean O'Connell Show as we wrap things up on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Utah ESPN Radio Network. Wrapping things up on the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. I have Farmer and Chemist gift card, Jersey Mike's gift card, and Papa Roach tickets. If you could tell me where the Utah scoring defense ranks after the BYU game. In the Big 12 Conference, where does Utah's defense rank in scoring defense after BYU? 877-353-0700 on the Dish Pros text line. The Drive with Spence Checketts is next. Spence Checketts is the host of that show, and he's sitting across from me here in our Broadway studios. Hi, Spence.
Can I get some Papa Roach ticks, or are those all taken?
Sorry.
Damn it.
I'm taking 74 people.
74 people.
Yeah.
See, this
Bring
giveaway.
your own mosh pit.
This giveaway strikes me as the same giveaway where, for the first time in my radio career, a listener won tickets and said no thanks. It was Limp Bizkit a couple months back. Won a couple of tickets to see our guy Fred Durst. No interest. Said no thanks. I'm good. But he did answer our question correctly.
You should have gone to that Limp Bizkit show, whoever you are.
You don't strike me as a Papa Roach guy.
I mean, I'm sure I drove around in my car with the windows down in the early 2000s singing along to some Papa Roach.
Trying to think the most popular Papa Roach song. It's escaping me, and I'm fine with that.
I think it would be Last Resort.
That's
probably.
what it is. Last Resort. Yeah.
Yes.
The Last Resort. Good gym song, right? Angry dude screaming about life.
There was a time for that on the radio, and there was a
For
time
sure.
for that in every angsty teenager's life.
Hey, when it's rear delt fly day, you need some motivation. And if Papa Roach gets you through it, there's nothing wrong with that.
You're doing some Romanian deadlifts? Let's go.
What's your gym routine these days as a former prize fighter who had to keep himself in tip-top shape?
Well, certainly not tip-top shape situation now. But no, I got a heavy bag and some wrestling mats and
You still throw hands then?
Some kettlebells downstairs, and then I try to make it down to the gym as often as I can to wrestle with the young bucks because everyone thinks they're going to prove something against the former UFC guy.
Yeah, but you weren't a wrestler per se, right?
That's why I'm going to sound really like.
Bring it. I want all of it.
If I go down there and I strike with people,
it's over. You might kill someone.
Well, no, because I'm a good training partner.
Okay.
But it's not as much of a test.
I see.
It's not as much of a
It's not bragging when you won $1 million in a belt, dude. It's all right. You're spitting facts.
It's still very difficult for me.
Is it?
It's a really hard workout, and yeah. If you've never tried wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, any of the grappling arts, it is a great hobby to get into, even as an adult. Especially, if you're worried about self-defense or whatever, it's the only viable way that you're ever going to actually take care of yourself. So everyone should do it. You don't have to come to my gym. Just find a gym, learn some jiu-jitsu.
What is your gym these days?
It's Jeremy Horn's Elite Performance.
Oh, you still train out there?
That's still the one.
How's our guy Jeremy Horn doing?
He's great, man.
Okay, good.
He's a simple man of simple taste.
He's good people.
And he just it's interesting because a lot of people with his kind of cachet in the business and in the sport, they open gyms and then they kind of farm it out, right? Like
just put their name on it type
put
thing.
Their name on it and they let someone else teach the classes. 90% of the classes at his place, he's teaching.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. He's a martial artist through and through.
Sure, that's awesome. Good to hear. To hear.
It's great. What's coming up on the drive?
Sean, today's a big day.
It is.
Yeah. It's a freaking NBA Leagues Cup, baby.
That's why I couldn't sleep last night.
They're trying something new. So the Suns are in town and play the Jazz. It's the first round of the NBA Cup, the Emeritus NBA Cup, because they're really trying to model this off after some soccer tournaments in Europe, mid-season soccer tournaments. I get such a kick out of the way this thing is covered by the NBA TV partners because they just have to pretend like they care so much. So you hear Windhorst say stuff like, LeBron is 9-0 in his last 9 elimination games. And he's including the NBA Cup last year that the Lakers won. It's like, dude, stop it, Windhorst. Cut it out. But we are going to talk a little NBA. Tim McMahon's going to roll by today. We'll continue to talk about Tuesday on my show, as the listeners know. We still kind of exist in the space of what has happened before we kind of turn the page to what will happen next. And I have some more thoughts on what we saw on Saturday night, you and I watching that game together on the sideline. And I heard from a lot of people after the comments yesterday where we talked about what Mark Harlan had to say after the game. And, Brett Yormark, man, he's sleeping with the fishes, Northeast, East Coast guy. He's not the guy to do this with. And honestly, I'll be honest. When I was walking home from the game, phone blows up. Like, dude, did you hear about it? I'm like, no, I'm walking home from the game. Pull up my phone, hear it. My first thought was he's going to be in a lot of trouble because of who Brett Yormark is and who he's always been in the past as an executive with the Brooklyn Nets. And, Jay-Z, he worked with Rock Nation, and he's just the wrong guy to do this to. And so I thought Mark was going to be in more trouble because you cannot go at the integrity of your conference, right? So I have some more thoughts on that. Heard from some people overnight after listening to what I had to say about it yesterday, and also the holding call. Terry McCauley has weighed in, the officiating expert, who said a foul is a foul is a foul because he's a nerd. So we'll kind of dig into some more of that. And we've got some good college football guests. JP, live in studio, and we're going to do some pro football with Max Chadwick. So a little bit of everything today.
All right, stay tuned for the drive. Then after the drive will be the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show. I'm hosting that. Bill's throwing me to those wolves tonight.
Oh, my God.
So that's going to be fun.
Wait, why did Bill tap out of like the most awkward Coaches Show of the season?
Hoops duties.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll allow that.
Yes.
That really reeks of Bill not wanting to deal with Kyle on a week after he lost to BYU and he's lost 5 straight games.
The maddest Kyle Whittingham we've ever seen.
Oh, my voice is tired, Sean.
Hey, you want to come me on the Coaches Show?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
Well, may God guide you on your quest.
It'll be the head coach himself, and then, of course, Manir McLean and Smith Snowden are the player guests. So tune in for that after the drive, but stay tuned right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, part of the Utah ESPN Radio Network.